So welcome back to another episode of the Mitsubishi EVO project. Thanks for joining me, and you can see here that on the last episode, if you haven't seen it, we've got a lot done. We've got the head on, cams in, everything's bolted in up here. This is not bolted down yet, so you can clearly see. So you can see everything's lubed up and ready to go. We've got all the assembly lube and everything's oiled up in there. So as you saw in that episode, we had to stop putting this back together because we had to put the timing disc on, and the timing disc was knackered. Also the crank sensor that sits behind here and bolts to the oil pump, that was knackered. So you can see we've got the new ones in, and you compare this old one that was no way I was putting it back on, where the Woodruff key mark is. You can see it to the new one, so you can see how much play there was in that, and that was just going to cause problems with the crank sensor pickup and obviously the cam sync. When it come to mapping, there was nearly no way of getting that to top dead center. And then also obviously this crank sensor was knackered, and you can see the shielding, the plug was all broken and nasty, so we've got a brand new one of them as well now, so we can get that on. And as you know, that sits behind the engine mount and bolts to here, so we didn't want to get all that together and not have the crank sensor to put on. This was the old trigger ring, and you can see how much plays in there, and the crank sensor's got to pick that up, and especially when it's moving around at high revs, it's not going to know what's going on, as opposed to the brand new one. So the brand new one, it's got no movement at all now, no side to side movement, and that's going to massively improve things. So that's all fitted, crank sensors fitted on there, trigger ring. I'm just getting the engine mount on there. The only bolts on this block side that need Loctite are these engine mounts. So they're doing up to 50 Newton meters. So I'm just going to put some lock thread on them now and get them bolted down. So I've just been bolting on some bits. You can see I've painted up the brackets and everything for the tensioner. On these, the tensioner works on like a hydraulic system. So you can see here, this tensioner goes up and down. As soon as I pull that pin out, it will tension the cam belt. There's a pulley, idler pulley that sits onto there. The oil pump housing, that's all freshly painted up. That's looking good again. Everything's been Loctited and done up to torque. So now we're going to turn our attentions to timing this cam belt up. So it's pretty easy on this car because it's got the balancer shaft deletes, and obviously you ain't doing the belt for the balancer shaft. Now on the timing belt on the back of the sprocket, so this is the balancer shaft sprocket, and you can see this timing mark here has to line up with this timing mark here, and then also the blade for the crank sensor is got to line up with that mark as well, so you can see that they line up perfectly, and then they obviously line up with that. You can see how nice this engine turns over. I can literally turn the crank and all the pistons and everything over by hand, so that's how nice that is. Also this side, normally you've got a balancer shaft in behind here, and it's all got to be lined up properly, but as long as you line that up with that timing mark, that mark there, that is perfectly lined up. You can put a screwdriver in the side of the block and all that lot, but that's when you've actually got the balancers. I've got to blank this one off as well with some sealant, because obviously the idler, the bolt goes in through there, and if I don't blank that off, it's going to leak out oil. So we've got the crank sensor fitted, looking fresh. So we've got a brand new crank sensor triggering. You know, this engine's looking really smart now, so it's all clipped up and everything out of the way of all the pulleys in its rightful position. I love the way when you get genuine items, they've even got like little divots and everything out of them to go into the perfect spots. So whenever I'm checking that we've got top dead center on any cylinder, obviously number one is top dead center right at the top. I normally put a bar down into the piston, but because we've got lovely shiny new pistons in there, probably have to zoom in, you can see we've got the piston at top dead center, so I know clearly that that number one is at top dead center with the timing mark. So it's time to get this tensioner bolted on. That just sits in there, and then once you've pulled this grenade pin at the top, that hydraulic part pushes on this arm. Leave this bolt loose as well, because you've got to put a tool in here to tension up this tensioner as well, so it's all got to be left loose. These belts are a little bit awkward to time, especially with the HKS cam gears, because the cam gears on these, the timing marks don't line up properly, so you have to do it all manually. On the Mitsubishi manuals, they tell you to use like paper clips around it, but you don't really want to use them because they're going to damage the belt. I've got these little clamps, you can see, with the rubber feet and everything on them. They just hold the belt in, and then with the crank one, you sort of have to make it one tooth past for it to all line up. You'll see at the end it will all line up perfectly, but that's the settings that Mitsubishi use, because the tension on these camshafts cause the pulleys to move backwards and forwards, so you almost have to time the pulleys a little bit wrong to make it all right in the end. So if you've ever done this before, you know exactly what I mean. You can see here the pump sprocket all lines up and everything, but it's irrelevant anyway. I just like to do it for peace of mind. So you can see here everything's kind of out of time, so you can see there's the timing marks at the top and the crank. Now the tensioner's on and tensioned. Obviously I ain't undone the auto tensioner yet, but as soon as you move this crank round to the right position, which is like there, you can see that everything starts to line up perfectly. It's just a really weird way to do it, but it's just because of the tension in the cam gears itself. So you can see something that makes it a little bit more complicated on these gears is because this is at top dead center now, these cam gears. You can see that these are for like DSM cars and other Mitsubishi 4G63 engine cars. So you can see there's timing marks all over the place. So you've got to be careful which ones you line up. So I've just pulled the pin on the tensioner. Now it's all timed up, and I'm just going to turn it over by hand a couple of times. Always do this when you've just timed up a car. That way you know there's going to be no valve to piston contact. Leave the plugs out as well, so it's a lot easier to turn over. See how nicely that's turning over. Once you've turned it over a couple of times by hand and you know there's no valve to piston contact, then make sure all the timing marks line up again, which we're going to do. So after turning it over 6 or 7 times, you can see everything lines back up in exactly the right place. All the pulleys, all the timing marks. So it's time to get all the covers and everything else back on this. There you go, got all the covers and that on the front of the Cambelt. You can see on this one it looks like it had a crank walk issue at one point. You see it was rubbing on there, or the bolts weren't done up properly in the Cambelt cover pulled away. Just started to put a few dress up bolts on there now. Nice fresh freshly painted cover. Got the clear cover on there as well, so you can see the cam belt and you can see the pulleys, but that's probably going to be changed in the future for a carbon one. We've got the cam angle sensor on the back here now, and that's all been set up properly. So a few dress up bolts on here as well. Thermostat housing's on as well, but at the minute we can't bolt in the thermostat itself, and that's because we think that this is a EVO 8 head on this, because we've been sent out an EVO 5 thermostat, and you can see clearly that they're a different size. So you see the left one's a lot smaller than that one, and also the water pumps and this pipe on the back has been changed as well. You can see that it's a different pipe, so it's definitely for a later one, because they've still got the Mitsubishi sticker on there with the part number. I'm going to get that cleaned up and give it a lick of paint and get that back on. I've just had to remove the engine and put it onto an engine crane, get it off the engine stand so I can get to this rear main seal. So I've just pressed in the seal into this, and I've got to put sealant around there. Obviously I ain't cleaned this up yet, so I've got to scrape off the existing sealant. So now the rear main scene is finally on there. You can see why I couldn't put the sump on without it, because it's basically an extra like a part of the block and the sump bolts to it. So I've got to go around this whole lot with sealant now. I'm going to fill in these holes that previous people have obviously scratched out when they've not properly removed the sump, and then we can get this fresh sump back on there now. I've cleaned this sump and cleaned it and cleaned it and cleaned it. Just to make sure that it's absolutely spotless. You can see it's had a paint as well, so it's going to look good. I've got some new hardware for it as well, instead of using them bolts that come from Mitsubishi. They're nasty, so I've got some little button heads, some stainless washers. They look a lot better. That's the sump all fitted, looking fresh with its new hardware. So we're just going to move on to the cam cover now, get that sealed up, and this engine is totally sealed. We're going to get this bolted on. Got a fresh new gasket for it. Mitsubishi one obviously come in the gasket kit, and also we've got the spark plug gaskets as well. I appreciate everyone suggesting what colour cam cover we should go for in this car. Obviously going to have a plug cover in there as well, so it's going to look fresh. I'm going to have a carbon cam belt cover on this side and a carbon plug cover in the middle. And the reason I haven't gone and done it at the minute is because obviously this is powder coated, so it has to be blasted back because it started cracking, so you can't just paint over the top of it. And when you do that, you obviously have to take out all these baffles in here to get any of the swarf out. You can see that's been done previously, and they've been riveted back in and all cemented up, so I don't want to do that. So we're going to just get a new cam cover and going to paint it up so it's looking fresh. Right, as if by magic, the cam cover is on. I've also put in the coil packs as well. You can see I've put the plugs in, but I'll probably pull them out when I'm going to turn it over when it's in the car, just so we don't get no load on the bearings. You can see the thermostat housing's all on there as well. Just put the new thermostat in. Also the water pump pulley, that's on as well. I've also painted the tensioner pulley, but I'm going to put that on yet, so I'm going to put that on when it's in the car. So now we're going to move on to this turbo. So as everyone knows now, this is the FP Black turbo for the Evolution 9. So that's a lovely big turbo, going to flow loads of air, and there's absolutely no in or out or side to side place. So the turbo is like new. One thing I did notice though is the setting of the actuator. So I knew straight away that that was wrong, and when I moved the actuator, you can see there's loads of play in it. So normally what that is this penny valve is not shut. So you can see there's loads of play in it. So if I pull this out quickly, this pin out, and then I pull this out, you'll see that this penny valve, that's shut. That's open. So when it's shut, then it's obviously going to be making boost, and then the actuator opens up. But you can see it's being held open by the actuator. So whoever set this previously did not set it right, didn't know what they was doing. Obviously they're putting up rated one on there because it's a Mamba one, and they just didn't know what they're doing. So it would have created loads of lag. Obviously the car wouldn't have been able to produce the boost it should have from the boost controller or the ECU. So we would never been making the power that we needed to make. So we're going to put some preload on that as well. I'm going to get to stripping this down. I'm going to pull off the manifold because I've got some brand new Mitsubishi gaskets for the dam pipe and for this flange here. Might as well replace them while it's out. So I'll get to cleaning that up. But you can see the turbo is as fresh as can be. Right, so I've just pulled off this lovely stainless 3-inch dam pipe off, just so I can show you what's going on inside this turbo a little bit more clearly for people that don't understand. So you can see here that this actuator has been fitted at some point, but I don't know who, and it's been incorrectly adjusted. So you can see what it's actually doing is, you can see down the back there, is holding open this penny valve. This penny valve needs to be shut until the boost controller or the ECU opens this arm. So if this wastegate is open like this, it's just going to be leaking exhaust gases straight from the manifold that ain't going to be going into the turbine itself. So what that's going to cause is all the exhaust gases are going to come out this penny valve. Obviously it's not going to be every exhaust gas is going to come out. It's going to still at least spoil the turbo a little bit, but the turbo is never going to get up to its efficiency range. It's never going to be able to reach its target boost. The ECU is not going to be able to control the actuator because it's not going to know what's going on. It's going to try and get to its target boost, but it can't actually close this penny valve, and this turbo is just going to be really, really laggy. So if you're going to adjust an actuator, you need to have someone that knows what they're doing. They need to be pressurizing this actuator to a crack-off pressure. Inside here there is springs, so this needs to be adjusted fully properly. I'm going to do it before this obviously goes back on the car, but if you don't know what you're doing, don't just think you can bolt on an actuator, because you actually make your car worse. If you've got no preload in this wastegate, this penny valve is going to get blown open with high back pressure. Now it won't happen so much with a big turbo like this, but on a small turbo like a KO4 or KO6 at high revs with no preload, the wastegate is going to get blown open. But this is a massive leak. This ain't just a small leak. You can see there's a really big gap there, and it's going to create a massive amount of lag. So I've just pulled the wastegate arm off just so you can see how far it is out. It's at least half a moon, as you call it when you're setting these up. So if I put it back to closed position, you can see it's nicely fully closed now. That's how it should be. So you can see it's obviously a twin scroll wastegate. That's how it should be, and you can see how far it is out on the actuator. If I plug that actuator back in to where it was set, you can see it opens it back up again. So this is all going to be set properly. So what I'm going to get to do now is going to strip down this turbo. I'm also going to strip down this inlet manifold, give it a proper clean up, clean out. So that's what I'm going to get on with now. And then next time you see this engine, I'll be putting it into the car with all the turbo set up. See, I'm just cleaning up the manifold now. So I've just completely stripped down the turbo because obviously I can't trust anything that was done to this car. So I want to do it all myself. You can see the turbo is completely away from the exhaust housing as well now, so I can give that a proper clean up, get some wire wheel on that. I've just measured the extruder and the inducer of this compressor wheel, and it's a big boy. You can see I'm replacing every gasket, so we've got all the brand new genuine OEM gaskets, oil return, you know, we've got all the O-rings, every seal that we need. Even got like a proper exhaust gasket as well. You can see how nice quality they are. You can see that this turbo's run with an inefficient air filter at some point. You can see it's got a lot of dust and dirt that's got into the turbo, so that's going to need a proper clean up as well to make sure that there's no contaminants going into the engine. I'll show you the size of the extruder on this compressor wheel, so you can see it's around 81.6 millimeters. Now it's only got a small inducer, which means it won't be able to grab as much air, but the extruder of it is massive. Now, if you compare that to an EFR like a 8376, would be able to flow around 750 horsepower. Obviously this turbo can't flow that amount because the exhaust housing and the turbine wheel is not as big enough. But you can see on the back here we have got cut back blades, which wasn't really necessary, but it means that this turbo can flow a lot more air. So you can see I'm going to get to cleaning up this core. A lot of oil and that's on there, a bit of surface rust, can't have that going on, especially with this fresh engine. Can't have a dirty, nasty turbo on there, so I've been cleaning up that manifold. So I also need to now get on with rebuilding this clutch as well. Obviously, you see that the clutch was trashed in the previous episode. The clutch plates were knackered, so I'm just going to go through the whole clutch, make sure it's all in spec before I even start to assemble it. We've got these brand new clutch plates to go on as well, so it's going to be fresh. And you can see why I haven't been able to put it on yet, because on the engine stand there's no way of getting it on. I'm going to get some, or make some spacers up in the future just to extend this out so I can actually get a clutch behind it. But even with a twin plate clutch, it's so thick that an engine stand I won't be able to get it on. So that'll be the next episodes now, because I've got a lot to get on with. I haven't been able to work as much on this engine as I've wanted to, which is why there's been a delay in the upload. So I appreciate everyone waiting.